Bernard Aboba, Microsoft, Principal Architect, Skype.
Great. And so, Bernard, your history. You've been at Microsoft for about 20 years. Right? What are some of the big breaks that you had, some mentors in your career, milestones wise, what you've done?
So I've had an interesting educational background. I started out in computer science and electrical engineering for undergraduate, but then I went on actually to work in the energy industry for 10 years. And I actually have a mechanical engineering degree and a PhD in petroleum engineering, of all things. And so one of my big mentors, I think, were some of the professors I had at Stanford when I was in graduate school, in particular two, a fellow by the name of Hank Ramey and Bill Brigham, both in the petroleum engineering department. And the thing that struck me about them is they were both very accomplished in industry and also as professors. So they came to the university after a very distinguished career developing essentially what is the oil industry in the United States, going back even to the 30s and 40s. So what struck me about them was they were both incredibly knowledgeable about their field, but also they had enormous industry impact and impact on the country as a whole.
Right, right. Some of the things that you've accomplished in the past are quite storied. You've been at MSN Network, right?
Right. Yeah. So my first job at Microsoft was actually building what became the MSN dial-up service, and that was a very short fuse thing. It was something we started just in January of 1995 and had to ship it in August. So we actually had to build the internet, much of what we think of as the internet, from scratch. And it was just an enormous effort working with UUNet and other internet providers across the world. Internet dial-up didn't exist when we began, and we essentially created that entire industry. And that taught me a lot, not only about the technical aspects of change, but about all the business and financial and other aspects to actually change the world in a way that results in massive deployment. Those lessons have carried over in everything I've done. When I first started looking at the problem of 802.11 security and why Wi-Fi had not been widely deployed, the security aspects became obviously important, why it hadn't entered the enterprise. And so what became 802.11i, or what we think of as Wi-Fi security, was built not only from a sense of what technically needed to happen, but how the industry needed to change to allow enterprise to actually deploy the technology. And that included understanding all of the barriers within enterprise, what type of security would be needed, what the barriers, what would happen, for example, if the security were cracked. And so we had to design a system which eventually really enabled an entire industry to grow.
Yeah, fascinating. Right on the cutting edge of that. And carried it through to your days now. You're running Skype. Okay?
Right. So I'm one of the architects in Skype, and some of the same considerations really came to mind with respect to WebRTC, because when I first started working on WebRTC, it was obviously incredibly powerful technology, but at the same time there were gaps that were preventing it from being used. And they were both business gaps as well as technical gaps. And so the question was, when I started looking at it, what could allow this to really become a mainstream technology, and what is the potential of the technology? And one of the things we saw when I started talking about customers, and this is something I've learned from the very beginning, you have to talk to people using the technology. You have to talk to the administrators and really understand what it's like for people using it and what is preventing them from using it. And one of the things we found is that WebRTC had this tremendous potential in mobile. So I would talk to customers, and the first thing they would mention is, wow, we think this is incredibly great for building our mobile apps. So it was interesting to learn really that WebRTC wasn't only about the web.
Right.
That's carried through in a lot of the work we did. And so when we began work on what we call ORTC, our goal from the very beginning was one API for web, mobile, and server. Because the other thing customers told us is that they had no server infrastructure. They couldn't use the technology. So we thought, well, can we have one API that can help them do all three? And so that's been the consciousness all the way through. And so ORTC isn't just about a new API for the web. It's about kind of enabling WebRTC to really have the kind of impact that it could have.
And where do you see where does this go? Where does this trend go from your perspective?
Well, I think once you've enabled application developers, mobile developers, and web developers, I think you're going to see a flood of creativity. Peter Thatcher talked about it in his talk. Even the things that have been done so far, many of them are exciting and incredible, but I think you'll see things that we haven't even thought about. Because what WebRTC does is it really frees the developer up from having to do a million and one little lower level things, and they can just think, what experience do I want to create? And they can do it at much greater velocity and much faster than they could have done it before. So I think we'll just see just amazing things come out of it. And what you need is a combination of the web technology, the mobile, and the server together to kind of make that all real on a large scale.
And so Microsoft's committed, obviously, and part of the
I'm not going to talk. Well, Microsoft is a big company, and so I'm not speaking for every group in the company, but I'll say that I think people understand the potential of this, and certainly, my management's been very supportive of my work on it. And so I think we'll see how far this can go, and I certainly think it has enormous potential to, particularly for developers, to be an exciting development.
Well, it's great to see you and your participation in there with your career and your expertise being a part of it. It speaks volumes to the potential of the group, so that's a good thing. A little bit about you personally and any charitable groups, anything that you subscribe to that you'd like to talk a little bit about?
Sure. Well, personally, I've been involved in a lot of charities over the years, nonprofit organizations. I've been on the board of a bunch of them. My current big project, I would say, relates to hunger, and particularly in the Seattle area. So that's kind of been my project for the last year, and I intend to work on it some more this year. You'd be surprised at how many people go to bed hungry, even in potentially wealthy areas. And so that's kind of my project, working with a bunch of the organizations in the Seattle area. Oh, well, first of all, I love the CTA because it's easy to get around and very quick from the airport. There's such vitality in Chicago. Particularly, I'm a lover of baseball, so you have two interesting teams, Wrigley Field. It just has a sense of vitality, and also the whole lakefront area is so beautiful. So there's a lot here. Art, of course, at the Art Institute. It would be actually a lot of fun if I could, instead of being here all the time, could get out and explore the city. But it's pretty busy at the conference.
Well, we thank you again, Bernard. We're glad to have you here, and anytime. Thanks again.
Thank you.